What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, Roy, and we are back with the second installment of my newly crafted series. Again, I'm not really sure how this is going to pan out in the long term. Yeah. I guess I was thinking about Roy because of the new Rick and Morty episode. I know one of the themes consistent throughout the last video, and really was that 2 swords? That's pretty cool. One of the themes consistent in the last video, and I think just generally if you catalog what I do on a daily, weekly basis, it's very anti-consumerist, and of course I mention Rick and Morty as my first thing there, but I do think it is a very it's a really entertaining show. I really like how it kind of points out all these subtle, social and economic, really things that we just do and kind of don't think about, but really just making them very obvious to us, and not in a way that is proposing any kind of solution. Generally, I don't think the show has an agenda, which is something I would look for in any kind of content that I would consume, which I think is refreshing, at least in this day and age. So I do like it that it doesn't really offer any solutions there, but I do wish it. I do feel like at times there's such a focus on it being this meta commentary about the things we do and meaninglessness of our lives or something, that it kind of doesn't. It forgets to be funny sometimes. It's more just like engrossing in whatever plot line that is. But again, I still think it does a pretty good job. Anyway, just some random things I have wrote down on today's docket. Again, this is all I have is just like an off-screen text file that I'll be using to kind of guide these monologues. Today I have this idea of, at least the first part, of perfectionism, and something that's how it's played, I guess, a role in my life. I would consider myself a recovering perfectionist, to put it in those terms. I certainly do still suffer from a lot of tendencies, and not in the sense that it's like I don't think of it as being a bad thing. It's just I run into problems where I am only interested in turning in my best work, which really is like what teachers would tell you, right? Like, turn in your best work. Like, you're not doing your best work, you're doing it wrong or something like that, which to an extent is true for those people that struggle to turn in anything, or turn in low effort work or something. But I guess I realize a bigger problem with starting stuff, like getting things done, because I think as someone who has a strong desire to do everything like 130% of the way, it's kind of hard to get started sometimes. So there's probably some phenomenon or some name to that phenomenon, but more or less that's what I experienced. So a quote that kind of is in line with that is like good is the enemy of great, which, like, I guess makes sense. It's okay. It's like something is good enough, therefore like there's no reason to go overboard. And then you also hear that like being perfect is the enemy of being great or something like that. Like, the desire to be perfect can have you in this never-ending loop of not really accomplishing anything, which again I also do think is a thing. So that's something as well. But I really think perfect can be seen as more of the enemy of good, great, and bad, only because generally if you have a strong desire to be perfect or something to be perfect that you're involved in, generally you're either going to do it close to that ideal or you're not going to do it at all, which is why, would you rather have some kind of bad product of your work, whether that be schoolwork or work or anything really, or something that's perfect. So it's like, would you rather have, I guess you could make it mathematical and say, would you rather have like a 1% chance of you creating something perfect, or like an 80% chance of you creating something but it being bad, right? But with the other 99% chance, in the case that it's not perfect, you don't make anything. So would you rather, where are the odds cut off, right? Because then I guess from there you could extrapolate that something good would happen maybe 50% of the time, the other half of the time nothing happens or it's bad, and then something great might happen 30% of the time. I don't know, you could make it mathematical, but I think that's kind of overanalyzing it too. But in general, it's something that is, I think it's hard for a lot of people, and it's hard for me. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't something that was that played a factor, I guess, at least in my day-to-day, month-to-month operations. So it is hard. I think part of it is just the ability to say no kind of helps with that, in the sense it's like you're saying no to yourself about making otherwise meaningless improvements to something, or embarking on these over-ambitious ideas. Because that's really where I fall apart, is that I'll have these ridiculously ambitious ideas for some kind of project or something, and then I end up essentially spinning my wheels on nothing, because it's either going to be that perfect ideal or really close to that, or it's going to be literally nothing at all. Shit. No. Damn it. This son of a bitch. I'm gonna fucking kill this thing. Damn it. No. Sorry, I just got focused up. This stupid gas, this being a pain in the ass. Yeah, so anyway, that's been something that I think plays a non-zero factor in my day-to-day. Oh my fucking god. I wonder if I could. This is gonna be stupid, probably. Shoot. I was trying to pearl onto him. Whatever. Sorry, I got pretty distracted from the point there. But yeah, it's interesting to think about this idea of perfect and how it plagues the lives of many. And I find myself probably on the wrong side of that coin more often than I'm on the right side, I guess. The right side being, trying and producing something rather than just not doing anything at all, or being okay with doing a shitty job or something. Again, there's probably 1,000 ways to define all of those, but that's just the way I'll do it. This is frustrating that this motherfucker blew up my thing. Anyway, yeah, so this idea of perfect is an interesting concept I've been wrestling with. I guess it does come down to what someone considers important enough to try and make perfect. But then again, I think that's also hard for a lot of younger people to decide, considering they're still kind of figuring themselves out at a very basic level. So it's not super easy to immediately decide what's important when they're still figuring things out themselves. And I probably fit into that category. I do fit into that category, so I'm not going to pretend like that's I'm above that in any way. Anyway, another interesting. I guess I'm just going to be randomly switching topics, because again, I don't stay focused for that long, very well at least. One interesting, I guess, idea, just about, I don't know, humans. I feel like every new generation, whether it be the Gen Z or however you want to, the millennials or whatever, people born in 1970, people born in 2002. It's always this idea of like, oh, it's society's getting worse, or culture's worse, or the food is worse, the work ethic's worse. And I thought this was an interesting thing to think about. So it's like, is there a way to objectify whether or not we are getting worse? Because I think it's plausible. In the sense that the internet is something that I think is something you could point to and blame for us getting worse in whatever way you want to define that. There's certainly a lot of merit to whatever that argument entails, in the sense that the internet is melting our brains away. There's really, I think, two major camps of the internet. I think this is not really a unique idea either. I think people either believe that the internet is like a great thing and is mostly good, and maybe has like a few drawbacks if you can't control your use or something like that. And there's people, again, I probably fall into this category more than the latter, but people that think that the internet has fucked us all, for lack of a better phrasing. And yeah, I'm probably on that end, just because I think that it has taken us in a direction that is it's hard to come back from. And that's why I got on the topic of like, have we gotten better or worse? And there's a pretty good case for it getting worse. You could try and point to statistics here, but I'm going to try not to use that as a arguing point, only because it's, you can really, someone who works with data in a certain capacity, I know that you can really, in the same way you could, cover the news weird to like make people believe ridiculous stuff and not technically lie. You can also like manipulate data to whatever means that you want to. So I think using some statistic here to generalize about the internet's impact on our society is kind of a tough thing, or a really stupid thing to do. It's not tough. You could easily do it. It's just, I think it's kind of stupid. But I mean, and again, this is subjective because I think I'm just going based off of my day-to-day existence. I'm not going to pull statistics off this because, I mean, even the belief in statistics is something that has gone down in our day and age, which is funny. So objectivity as a whole is even just kind of fading away, which has far-reaching implications, I think, especially for the world of academia that deals in this objective thing. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear that, but there's like my phone's going. I don't know. There's all these noises going on out here. Hopefully, it's not coming through to the mic. But anyway, I guess in short, the question being asked: do I think we're worse off than the prior generation? And I think you can look at economic factors and say yes, or quality of life and say yes. No. I mean, you can look at economics and say where our economy is. There's more money being circulated now than there was in our parents' age. There's the quality of life in general is better. We have iPhones and the internet, so we have more capacity. But I think if we define it in terms of personal satisfaction, and again, we're going to include ignorance in this formula. Like if some dude worked on a farm his whole life and didn't realize that he was and was happy every day on the farm because he loved whatever it is, and didn't realize that he was some pawn in the greater chicken industry or something. You could create some story of anything really, but we're gonna neglect that and say the ignorance there is a good thing in the sense that the farmer was happy. And you could extrapolate that to any occupation that any occupation that was in that category, right? That was blissfully ignorant of their situation. I think in general, some of the things that has happened is that since there is less ignorance in the sense that you could theoretically learn and know anything that goes on just by punching around a few buttons online, that people are more aware of what they could have, because what they say is what you don't know can't hurt you, which I think is true to a certain extent. And even true in the extent of not like, oh, what you don't know about big corporations can't hurt you. Like, okay, fine, like it could be, forcing you into poverty or something like that. I'm not going to make that argument. But I even think about like what's possible, right? So it's like you see some ad for some dude who claimed he spent X amount of years working some minimum wage job, and then did stock options or something, and was all of a sudden some millionaire, and then now is like living this great life. And again, we talked about the pleasure and hedonic set point thing last time, so it kind of feeds into that a little bit. And ultimately, that guy's probably not any happier, I suppose. But now that, like, instead of you living in this blissful ignorance that, like, you milking the cows and the chickens. I'm using the farm as an example just because it's like a very reductive version of a simplified, old-timey job that is, mainly phased out due to, advances in society. But now instead of kind of finding pleasure in these small things, we fantasize about pleasure in these, macroscopic senses. So having a, Bugatti or whatever fancy, whatever things it is that, you might see online because of the internet. Again, I'm kind of using the internet as a boogeyman here, which will be a common theme only because I think that is, I truly think without being a entitled youth, that is and will be the ultimate detriment that comes out of our... I think when the history books are written after our time, the internet will be pretty much the only thing they talk about because of its prevalence and its impact on society, culture, everything, economics even. But now, like, instead of having, kind of being forced in a sense, and not knowing that, the farmer's being taken advantage of by some wealthy landowner or whatever, instead of finding enjoyment in milking the cows and, being happy about how beautiful his wife is, he doesn't have the option to go look at somebody who's hotter than his wife online, right? He just doesn't, because that was the age he lived in. Now that we do, it's like it makes sense to be constantly striving towards, trying to find the metaphorical hotter wife. The hotter wife is again, probably a terrible example to use, but it's still just, it gives you this sort of carrot in front of you to run after constantly. And I think there was a lot less of that in the age before technology. I think largely that is a negative thing, just because, again, what you don't know can't hurt you. It's almost like, I guess since I was talking about Rick and Morty, this makes sense. Like, who's easier to be satisfied? Like, yeah, I think most people would rather be Rick than Jerry because, Jerry's a loser. But ultimately, like, Jerry can be happy with very, very little. Like, it would take almost nothing to make Jerry happy, right? He enjoys the solidarity and the simplicity of a otherwise meaningless life. Whereas someone like Rick, who might have the benefit of, omnipotence, I suppose, and I guess in some sense we have that benefit as internet users, at least that theoretical benefit. But he's insatiable. Like, how is he supposed to, he obviously struggles. That's like part of the whole storyline in the show, is that he's struggles to find any kind of meaning in his life, only because he's aware of everything that there is and how he fits in the bigger picture. And I think, again, and you could kind of nitpick and tic-tac about what is good and what's bad about knowing more, right? And you generally would say that knowing more is better, but I kind of find myself on the other side of that, meaning I think in terms of the internet's growth, knowing less was probably a better position for us to live in. Because I think about even the decisions that I made as an individual. I asked myself, would I have made those decisions if I was not aware of, like, if the internet had no impact, right? If I couldn't see, what great life so-and-so, or what great things or what opportunities were out there. And granted, maybe I I'm achieving more of my potential because I'm able to pursue such and such, right? But at the same time, ultimately, you're more dissatisfied with day-to-day life, knowing that you're not there and you're somebody's doing better than you in X way or this way or that way, and ultimately it becomes this huge dick measuring contest. It's no longer on the scale of your town, right? So the farm guy could, boast that he had the land, and the, blacksmith would boast that he had all the iron or whatever. And I mean, I'm using a very medieval example. Not that it's effective, but it's just what came to mind. But now it's like you're in a dick measuring contest with 7 billion people, or there's 18 billion devices on the internet, and again, I think probably half. I don't know what the exact number is, but like 4 billion people on the internet, all kind of in this giant dick measuring contest. And obviously you're not going to look good to most of them because it's sample size is huge. How are you supposed to even compete? But I think naturally we do, because it's evolutionary. That we want to compete and be better than our other tribesmen, I guess, back in caveman days. But it is it's an impossible ideal. Like, you're not gonna, and even at, like, let's say you are in the top 0.001% of something. Generally, there's not a consensus on what is really the best at anything, or being better than anyone else at any given thing. Is, once you get to a certain level, it's very, who cares, right? You're over negligible details. I guess once you get into the nitty gritty of whatever you claim to be this expert at, and it also kind of is accelerating this idea of, like, specificity, I suppose, in terms of your livelihood. So I guess the example is that example that I like using is the person making shoes, right? I think someone said this example, but they someone, like, back in the old days or whatever, used to make shoes from start to finish. There's one person that could make shoes. They would make the sole, they would make the leather, whatever, you know what I mean? They do the whole process of making the shoe. And they understood all the whole process. They found gratification in the start to finish. But since generally it doesn't really help you to be a small producer of a, niche good. It's more beneficial for you, like in the eyes of our society, to be a mass producer of something. And generally, individuals can't even be mass producers. That's a impossible standard. So then you're forced to kind of hyper specialize in some super niche area. So, like, you spend your whole life becoming. I think the funniest thing I saw was there was this Onion video about this guy. Like, the title of the video was "Grown Man Wastes Entire Life Studying Anteaters" or something. And he's like the leading expert in the entire world on anteaters. And then the whole interview, he's just dejected that, like, I wasted my entire life, like, studying anteaters. And the reporter is just kind of rubbing it in. Again, this is an Onion thing, so it's totally satirical. But the guy, like, just realizes that all the time he spent being the best at, his super niche thing, because he probably realized being the best, biologist as a blanket term is something that's impossible. Like, how are you even going to measure that, right? That's impossible. But theoretically, you could become the leading expert on, anteaters, and everyone would trust what you have to say, right? And that's where we'd get our respect from, is that everyone is, I believe this guy, no one knows more about anteaters than he does. But ultimately, once you get that specific, and I guess in the metaphor of the shoe, once you get so, like, to such a small level, or a small part of the shoe, like the creation of the shoe, you begin to lose all kind of bigger picture, where it's like, this is no longer rewarding. So whereas the person in the olden days found lots of gratification in making the entire shoe from scratch, starting from nothing and making an entire shoe, and you could sell the shoe to a local townsman or whatever. Now he's maybe he doesn't know anything about how to make the whole shoe, but is like a textile genius on like cold weather waterproof sports shoes or something like that, where it's like some ridiculously niche sub area of that, and he's rewarded, I think, in the field. Like, he'll get paid more because he's the leading expert on these very specific type of shoe. But is it equally as gratifying to this person to be to only really have earned respect in some super small area that, quite frankly, most people don't probably care about? No. I mean, I think you'd rather be, and I think one way to frame this is like the pond, right? So you've heard about the fish in the pond, and generally people agree it's good to be the bigger fish in a small pond just because you can stand out more. You can, you can excel and feel gratified in your big pond and be the voice of however you want to be, whatever kind of fish you want to be in your pond, you can do that. I think people can respect different roles in the pond, but when the pond becomes essentially infinitely large, and thus you become infinitely small because you're only going to have so much impact. I think that there's a lot of purpose that is lost there for people. And I think the internet has essentially dropped us into this metaphorical, humongous pond that now everyone's trying to be top fish. But it's like, you guys are all fish. You're puny. You're ultimately like, the pond makes you look like a speck of dust or a grain of rice. So it's not nearly as, and again, maybe in the olden days you weren't aware that there was a bigger pond. You were ignorant of that there was larger waters. You felt that you were the leading authority in your little pond area, which again, I think that's the whole ignorance and bliss thing. Like, right, just you didn't realize what was out there, so you were happy with what you had. But not realizing what you can't have has ultimately made you frustrated about what it is that you don't have, just because it's easier to focus on that. And I think that was largely beneficial for us, is to focus on what we don't have to survive and whatever, but quickly becomes a point of contention when we're talking about the internet and its impacts on society. So just a very, very interesting topic. And so I suppose getting back to the main question, are we better than our previous generations? AKA, do we lead more satisfying and fulfilling lives? And I think with the onset of awareness and technology, the answer is probably no. Which I realize also is coming from my perspective. So I was like, oh, you damn kids. Like, I realize the people that grew up in the 80s thought their parents were stupid and their lives were so much harder or something like that. I don't really know. I think generally our lives have gotten easier. It's just the problems have changed and pivot. And I mean, ultimately, I actually think it's kind of a stupid question to answer, just because, again, how are you going to determine whose problems are, more worthy? I mean, I don't know. Like, would you equate any of the problems that you face on a daily basis to starvation? Because that's, at some point your ancestors, that was their, like, primary boogeyman, was starvation. And now we're sitting here complaining about, the processing power on our freaking GPUs, and it's like, what do we really have to complain about? So, there's that part of it too. So, so I guess I don't really know if that answer is right. I don't think it is. I think it's just maybe. Again, it is kind of a hard question to answer, and I guess that's why I've brought it upon myself to try and answer it. I'm taking out these corners, by the way, because the wither skeletons keep getting stuck on them. So, Just gonna get rid of them. Yeah, pretty interesting topic. One thing I do think that we have continually improved on is we have more freedom than like in generations as generations go, we have more and more freedom. I think it's easiest to see this on the scale of like the freedom your parents gave you versus the freedom their parents gave them. Might be the easiest way to see it. And we have more freedom now. I don't think anyone would really argue with that. The question is whether that's been a good thing or not. Which, again, depending on who you ask, probably not. And I would probably say no to that as well. So that, just because I think, especially early on when you're impressionable and you're trying to create lifelong habits and virtues about yourself, I think having stricter guidelines to abide by, whether you think it's the right thing or not, is good, even just as an exercise, right? So I'm not saying that your parents are always right, because honestly, a lot of parents are just as stupid as their kids. But at the same time, even if it's just for you as a younger person to practice, at least know what it's like to not have to follow directions or to be I'm not really sure a great way to phrase this, but I do think it boils down to being too impressionable and too young to make your own intelligent decisions. I think we've been just given too much power at a young age, and then ultimately it's ballooned into this thing where the youth are hypercritical of their parents, and despite not really having a great grasp on the world, and then the push to make these big governmental or economic changes, which again were probably big issues and are big issues, but were largely ignored by the greater generations. Partially out of ignorance, but again, that it kind of creates a host of other problems. So I guess it's kind of a pick your poison type territory, which is also pretty interesting. I'm gonna go with kind of a dumb query now. Maybe I'll get back to that topic later, but kind of a stupid question that I thought would be interesting to kind of reason with myself and talk about is the time old. I'm not even sure what the phrasing is. But the time old question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. And just to save everyone the time, I think I'm going to say that the egg came first. I realize it's like, there's no answer to that scientifically or something. I don't know what the real the biologists have to say about that. I don't really care. But here's my reasoning, right? So there's this evolutionary mutations that happen, right? And at some point, the mutation took an animal from being a chicken or being not a chicken to being a chicken, right? So there was some step there. But, right, so the animal is, so let's think about the first chicken, right? So we have, let's say for assumption's sake, we have our first chicken. I'm looking at the first chicken. How is there any way that chicken, again, we're saying it's a chicken. We've accepted that. Is there any way that does not come from a chicken egg, right? What egg was it if it wasn't a chicken, right? So even I think the crux of the argument becomes its parent, again, for whatever the exact term is, I'm not entirely sure. Its parent laid an egg that was not of its species, which I realize it might seem impossible, but I don't think it's that it's essentially the. I mean, I don't think it's that outlandish to make that, assertion that the egg that the chicken was birthed from was indeed a chicken egg, but it wasn't. It was birthed from something that wasn't a chicken. And I think that's why I say the egg came first, because it's a chicken egg, right? But its parent that birthed it was not a chicken. There was a mutation that made it produce that chicken egg. So I don't know. That's kind of without going into too many more details. I love to hear any kind of quarrels that people have with that. I don't know. What are the counterpoints to this? To me, it seems like a relatively open and shut case in the sense that it's there. But again, I think a lot of those questions that are like that these purposeful brain teasers really boil down to how do we define a chicken? How do we define an egg? Right? And if you define it in some weird way, you could really make any answer correct. Correct. Again, I'm going to put in quotes, air quotes there. But I think if we're thinking classically, very simply, our definitions of egg and chicken, it's my personal belief that it is the egg that came first. Because I think whatever animal came out of that egg, or if we say that the chicken was, looking at a chicken, had to have come from a chicken egg, right? I don't see it, I think the parent could have been mutated and laid a chicken egg despite not being a chicken. I think that was where the first chicken came from. Again, my 2 cents on the issue of that. Again, trivial, stupid question, but something fun just to kind of think about and mull over. Yeah, egg came first. So, I'll look over my thing here. So I guess going back to these this idea of generational difference. I think one thing I mentioned was that we've been given more freedom, right? And I'm of the camp just because I am a relatively autonomous person, and I think autonomy is largely the right step. The right thing is to be autonomous and independent. That's just the way I think. I'm always inclined to say that more freedom is a good thing, and I think there's a lot of people that probably agree with that. But also, I think if we're speaking in this context in terms of intergenerational well-being, it's possible the answer is not yes. That the more freedom in this case was a bad thing, and I think just because people were largely unaware of the implications of the internet, and by this time it's almost too late. We didn't really realize how much parents, I guess, to blame it on somebody, didn't realize how much freedom that they were really allotting when they placed that iPod Air or the iPad into their impressionable child's hand, that they were really giving them a sense of freedom that there's no coming back from, which is certainly paints freedom in the wrong light. And again, this comes from someone who is very pro-freedom. It's a good thing. And people say, it's like, technology, just how you use it. It's not the magician, it's not the wand, it's the magician, or whatever it is. Yeah, obviously, like, people have used technology for great things. We've been in, really developing new technologies on all fronts for decades now, and it's great. Everyone loves it. But again, there's a relative minority of people that are really doing the great things that, again, the internet, I'm not going to say the internet was intended for, because it's not like there was some altruistic intents behind the creation of the internet originally. It was a governmental experiment that they used and no longer had need for. It was for, like, military. You can look it up. It was just for, like, military communication. But once they released it to the public, they were just like, whatever, here's this little funky tool that people can use, and it ultimately became what it is now. But what was I saying? I don't entirely know. Oh yeah, there is people that are doing great things. I'm not gonna deny that and say that everyone's got their head up their ass with the internet. But ultimately, like, yeah, for every one person that is like doing research on some hyper-specific field of biology to help us develop some new drug, there's 18, Reddit mods with neckbeards, spamming the N-word into, just to have fun or trolling or what, what I mean? It's like the ratio between altruistic pursuits and, disruptive or just like childish behavior is strongly in favor of the other. And again, I'll put it's like for people who make meaningful connections with their old friends or whatever. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to deny that is a potential positive feature of the internet. Yes, like you can connect with anyone, you can get in touch with anyone almost immediately. But let's think about just, my usage or your usage. What percentage of that do you think is positive, in the sense that it's like you connecting with old friends, or talking to people, or sharing positive and whatever frame we want to put around this, versus me mindlessly consuming something, me talking shit to somebody, or me just pirating online movies to watch, or watching Rick and Morty off some weird cartoon site, instead of paying for it like I'm supposed to. I just think it's heavily in favor of the latter, in the sense it's very much not all the great things people are saying about it. I think everyone realizes that, really. I don't think anyone is that stupid that still is of the firm belief that only good things are happening on the internet. I think more bad things are happening. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sitting here, I guess in some ways, drawing issues or complaining. So what's my solution? I don't really have one. I think, I thought about this. I tried to design almost like a daily itinerary of all of what I felt to be positive, constructive uses of technology, while limiting anything that's not, I guess, again, for lack of a better way of phrasing that. And yeah, I think the internet is great, or really, I can say the internet, I think technology. I think the internet is being too specific there. I think technology is great for automating boring, monotonous things that don't bring people any joy, or getting rid of, at least specifically for me, things that I don't want to do, right? So, I'm trying to think of something that would be a great example. This would be really helpful for my argument if I could come up with something here. But let's just say washing dishes, for example. Okay, we have this great dishwasher that can, play music while it automatically senses what dishes are in there and washes or something. I don't know. That'd be something you could that is a useful usage of technology, instead of me interacting with whoever I live with or my family. I'm just gonna watch a YouTube video because they're more interesting. I realize that, okay, odds are, yes, you can find something more interesting, perhaps even more stimulating or educational via the internet than you could just walking around. But think about where that leads up, where that leaves you when we get to the end game, or the nth iteration, right? It's almost where you don't you expect nothing interesting to happen around you, around your life. You expect nothing your family or friends or people you're around to say anything interesting, because there's ultimately always something more interesting going on online, and it's just a couple clicks away, and you can just get way more. It's way more intriguing to you than anything that anyone around you would say. And again, where does this leave us? This, you can create these parasocial relationships with online figures, and then you complain that people complain they don't have any friends. Well, I guess that's where it leaves you. So, kind of answers your own question there. So yeah, but really avoiding, not actively avoiding, but just kind of deferring to whatever's more instantly pleasurable. This kind of goes back to our talk yesterday. You really come to expect nothing interesting going on with the people. You are less engaged with conversation with people you talk to or meet in real life. Again, I'm going to not to say the internet isn't real life, but in a lot of ways it's not, so I'm going to say it's not. So yeah, you miss out on that. Holy cow. Yeah. But yeah, and I think disengaging from that is very destructive. I think everyone agrees that, humans are social creatures. Yes, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. But I think the method of being social is also very important. So, is equally as important as maybe, that's the conversion? Oh, it's terrible. Ugh. I can't even make that. Oh, never mind. Yeah, what was I saying? Jesus, this is gonna happen a lot. I'm hoping I get better at this. I think this is just my brain being all types of fucked up. Where's all this? The blocks that I mined out for this? Surely they're here somewhere, right? I don't know. But yeah, I think the method in which people interact is also very important. So it's, it's important that you're not just interacting online as your form of. I think people have already seen that. It's not like I'm saying anything revolutionary or new. It's no shit. I think people understand it. They just, and I guess myself included, I'm deciding to do very little about it, because what can I do? Again, I'm this dust of a fish in this enormous pond. I guess one thing you do is just kind of create your own, again, to keep the metaphor going, just because that is the way I think. Box off some water and call it your pond. And then, maybe there's other fish in your pond, maybe there's not. I don't think it doesn't really matter that much. And then, worry about being as big of a fish you can, just forget about what's outside of it, which again is a really easy thing to just say. Doing it is really hard as well. And I think this also brings into this idea that I think is a funny thought, where it's stop caring about what people think about you, right? Because that's one big externality of the rise in technologies, is that you're under this microscope at all times. People are always watching you, or at least you're under the perception that people are always watching you. Whether they are or not is another thing. But yeah, don't give a fuck about what people think about you. But it's okay, well, it's one thing to actually believe that and do it, versus just appearing like you don't give a fuck about what people think about you, which I think is the more used option, is that people generally want the appearance of not giving a fuck, even though they tend to be the ones that are the most fixated on others' opinions of them. I think that there's probably some biological importance there, right? Why else would we be concerned with others' opinions of ourselves if it wasn't important in some regard? I mean, I I would think in some ways it is important. I just don't think we were ever evolutionarily prepared for this extent of what others are thinking about us, right? To this scale, I think. I don't think it was. I think humans were designed as social creatures in small circles, not in the endless pond that we're kind of sitting in today, which I think is, again, one way to kind of think about the crux of the issue is that there's just simply too much. Like I think people also realize that when they say that it's better to have just like a few good friends and like a bunch of crappy ones. I think evolutionarily we were built for these small communities that relied on one another and respected one another in their own individual fields, right? So it's people all respected the local shoemaker because they were the one that knew how to make shoes, and if you ever needed shoes, they would be the one to get you shoes. And I guess I'm using that as kind of a stupid example, but I think if you extend that later, it's like now there's really, like, you could theoretically find 1,000 people that could buy you shoes, right? You can find a gajillion shoes, which is good because it's like, okay, when I have this, I've maxed out the number of options I can have pretty much with relatively, for a functionally infinity, more or less. But now you lose all this personal connection and this social aspects of it that were at one time were very important. I think we could, as a species, we could probably evolve. We could probably evolve to be suited towards this lifestyle. I just don't think that evolution is anywhere close to catching up to the speed at which we're technologically advancing. I think it's magnitudes and magnitudes too slow. Evolution is, at least, to be able to catch up with what we've done, which is a problem and is an area for concern. But again, I don't really know where that leaves us, right? So, what is the solution? I don't. Your guess is as good as mine. What will happen? Again, I don't know. World War III, maybe. We could have a civil war. I'd see World War III is more likely than a civil war. Although I don't really see either of them as being that likely. Virtual reality is an interesting thing on the come up, in that it could truly isolate a lot of us. And we've established that that's not good. But I think the only saving grace from this is at an individual level to simplify the social stimulus, mainly technologically. So having a few good friends, and again, it's hard in this age of social hyper connectivity using technology. But I think that's a good direction to try and go in, is to not use technology as much, at least in that regard. Like you can still use Amazon to buy books and stuff. It's not like you have to go painstakingly. I don't think, like, people take it to the extreme where they're like living in the woods and stuff. It's like, okay, I'm glad that we've at least evolved from that much, right? It's not like we have to go live in the frickin' woods. But there's a middle ground somewhere where you're not living in the woods, but you're also not living with a VR headset duct taped to your face and scrotum, for 17 hours a day. Uber Eatsing, Domino's. There's a middle ground somewhere. And I think if we want to get through this period of rapid technological growth in a sustainable way, it'd be one way to try and find that middle ground. Maybe awareness is the first part of that. Maybe we're screwed. Again, I don't really claim to have any answers about anything. And surely if I did, I wouldn't be racking up, 11 views on all my videos. But it's still it's an interesting concept and idea to kind of wrestle with, I think. And I think it'll certainly be something that is more and more important in our society moving forward, is how do we try and combat, as counterintuitive as it sounds, try to combat our technological growth in pursuit of more human satisfaction, without really stifling, research and new things. I just think it's a very tough, complex issue as a whole, and it's hard to really kind of come up with any concrete solutions that are scalable to the extent that the internet is scaled. Yeah, I don't know. Just stuff I'm wrestling with. Interesting ideas nonetheless. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I feel like I am nearing the end of things to say for today, but certainly not tomorrow. Probably be back doing it again, because I did feel a certain weight lifted off me yesterday, and being able to kind of just talk to the void here for an hour definitely felt a lot better about. I don't know. I feel like there wasn't as many thoughts going through my head, which is good. That means it might be an effective form of, again, therapy is kind of a shitty word to use, but I think it was a little. I was pleased with how I felt after the first session yesterday. So maybe I'll keep doing it. Maybe I won't. If you watched it and enjoyed it, you can give me a like or a comment or something. If not, I will see you next time. Peace.